All right, we have a lot of information for today, so I'm just going to get started as folks join. Today's webinar is going to be a little bit different because we have a ton of information to share on this topic, retain your talent, measuring and sustaining employee happiness. We'll be answering questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to write them in the chat as well. My name is Christina Giordano, she, her, hers, and I'm the Partnerships and Community Manager here at All Voices. For today's agenda, we have a lot of great content coming up, so be sure to stick around till the end of the comprehensive conversation. We'll actually have a 5-step guide on rolling out your own effective employee feedback management EFM strategy and 3 reasons you can use to garner buy-in from senior management. Essentially, we'll be sharing A to Z guide from conception, ideation, pitch, execution, and feedback on deliverables, increasing employee happiness by building out a really comprehensive employee feedback strategy. So for the state of the workplace in 2021, for an employee, the state of the workplace is in turmoil, but it's also really ripe with opportunity. For an employer, the state of the workplace has become a little bit of a battlefield, staying really highly competitive in the minds of employees and potential employees. And it's become a really, not a nice to have, but a critical business operation. Having the ability to really retain your talent and capture the interest of new talent means being able to maintain and increase your revenue, innovation, and growth. Knowing how to keep your employees happy and loyal is really more important than ever. So this is a quote from one of our kind of industry experts here on the state of the workplace. As Dan Spalding, Chief People Officer at Zillow, shared, during the pandemic, something new that all individuals were going through for the first time. And it was a really important time to really ask employees for feedback in a really tangible way, redefine trust, and bridge that gap between human resources, people, and employees. This is another quote from one of our industry experts, Sukhinder Singh Cassidy, founder of the Board List. And she puts it, there is a macro surge in employee activism, right? About what they expect from their workplaces and boards post-COVID. And employees will start really demanding more of a say in how they work, where they work, and when they work. So what is called all of these changes? Of course, this past year has demonstrated that high productivity can be achieved without sacrifice of really long hours and time away from loved ones. Remote work hours are very much preferred by employees, and life is really unexpected. Decisions previously not made out of fear are being made now, and the job market is really full of opportunity as people are reflecting. And as employers begin to bring their teams back to work, employees are absolutely weighing their options. What does that mean for your business? The average cost of replacing an employee can range from 16% of their annual salary to more than 200% of their annual salary. To put some more numbers behind it, more than 50% of employees are considering switching their jobs in the next 12 months. Companies with happy employees also outperform their competition by 20%, so really increasing that bottom line. And the state of the workplace is leaning in favor of employees. Employers need to prioritize employee happiness and catch up with employee needs, because under the conditions of the current workplace, employee happiness is not just, good for morale, it's a good for retention and business and innovation at the end of the day. So what is employee happiness? We have this equation up here as well. It's a hard question with a lot of potential answers. Some employers are trying to measure happiness with a single score. So let's look at employee happiness with this equation. This means starting out with some tangible elements that are measurable, like good old compensation, a clear path of growth, stock options, a corner office, high annual budget, professional development. These are all things that can easily be measured and quantified. When you add them together, it does not equal employee happiness. In the same way, tracking employee happiness is not a simple answer of promoters and distractors or the average answer on an annual survey question. And in the same way, we can't simply measure an employee's happiness level. You can't measure or track what leads to employee happiness. There are simple ways to really tangibly create options and combinations for options to consider. And some employees may prefer health benefits, while some others may prioritize paid time off. Others have larger budgets. So a lot of considerations for your organization. The bottom line is that you cannot measure employee happiness with a single equation because so much of what makes up employee happiness is intangible, not easily measured by numbers quantitatively. And this is what the equation of an attempt would look like, essentially this circle chart. So I'm gonna kind of share an anecdote from one of my friends who was telling me about one of her first jobs in sales at a really high growth tech company. Looking back now, it's clear to her that it wasn't a great job or workplace, but at the time she was really young. It was her first job out of college. She was really a loyal employee, and she showed up every day giving 110% to a company that consistently gave its employees not 110%, let's say around 70. And that really wore her down day after day. She still remembers kind of describing that feeling that she had, but she knew that it was time to leave the job. And she couldn't put words at the time of exactly, why she needed to leave, but she knew how it felt in her gut. And I'm sure that some of you on this call could relate to that feeling. For so many of us, deciding to leave a job is really emotional, and there is no single deciding factor. So the question becomes, how can you possibly know how to keep your employees happy? You ask them with employee feedback. So defining employee feedback, many employers believe that collecting employee feedback is just asking questions in an annual survey, in a town hall, or in a one-to-one manager meeting. The current status quo about employee feedback is soliciting that feedback, forcing feedback from employees at a certain point in their life cycle at the company. But a good culture of feedback means giving your employees the opportunity to come forward when and where they need to, right, on their own terms. So for example, on-demand streaming versus cable TV, you want that feedback to be on demand. And we have heard the words, my door is always open from CEOs and HR teams, but we know that an open door isn't always enough. You have to offer those multiple channels. And collecting employee feedback is more than just one sentiment or survey or exit interview. It's a holistic process. It's intentional. Here are some insights about employee feedback from some of our experts in the industry. So Shelby was the founder of Shelby Walpa Consulting, and feedback should be ingrained into really every moment across the employee lifecycle. Feedback should be meaningful and is most valuable when it's specific, tied to tangible outcomes, respectful, timely, and ongoing. And you really need a culture of trust to have that foundation to even receive feedback in the first place. This is another kind of quote from one of our industry experts. So Jillian, Chief of Staff at JW Player, is talking about how employee feedback is what makes companies work. And if you're missing the voices of certain people in building out a company or a strategy, you do not have the best possible strategy. I was having a conversation with a leader the other day, and they were saying they have a 90% engagement survey for their annual kind of employee engagement survey. But they do want to get that 10% because that means they are missing some voices. So how do you collect employee feedback today? Here are a few common methods I'm sure everybody on this call is familiar with in terms of one-on-ones, hotlines, open door policies, people business partners, anonymous reporting tools, and of course surveys for engagement, life cycle, and annual. People business partners partner with leaders to really drive that employee engagement and create high performing teams. People business partners are also an incredible resource, but cannot see, hear, or react to every employee issue, especially in a remote environment or virtual first workplace. So alone, these methods are not effective. The ideal employee feedback structure should be to have all of the forums listed available to employees, and sharing these available forums should be an ongoing process to inform, educate, support, and listen to employees. This acronym was created by All Voices expert Shelby Wolpa. So thank you, Shelby, for this helpful acronym. So I stands for inform. So inform employees what feedback programs exist, why is it important, and what to expect when providing feedback via various channels. E stands for educate. Employees on specific guidance, tools, and information, i.e., internet resources, live trainings. S is support, so employees in different ways to assist individuals throughout the process, whether it's skip level meetings, office hours, and one-on-ones. And then last but certainly not least is L for listen. To ensure the employees really feel heard, listening has to be an ongoing and accessible process. So again, one-on-ones, engagement surveys, focus groups, and anonymous reporting. So this is an example for Zillow, a company who last year really focused on employee feedback. In addition to using All Voices as an employee feedback management platform, they're consistently offering multiple channels and prioritizing the wants of their employees, and it has really worked for them. 94% of employees at Zillow Group say it is a great place to work, compared to 59% of employees at any typical US-based company. Zillow was also named number 24 on the 2021 Fortune Best Workplaces for Millennials list, the biggest mover of the list, jumping 42 spots from its 2020 ranking. So the next question is how to develop a successful employee feedback strategy. So step number one, evaluate the different ways managers in your HR department are currently servicing feedback. How many methods are there currently? What software is being used to source them? Which methods are not working? Which methods are proving to be successful? And how can these be useful in incorporating that really comprehensive feedback? So here are some tips for success. You don't have to start from scratch. Somewhere, I bet somewhere in the company is successfully sourcing feedback. Whether it's scalable or not is the question. So really expand on that initiative and the actions of that thought leader that already exist and being received positively. Start by looking at places or initiatives you know are received really positively by employees. So this can mean combining efforts with something out of HR, like an employee who is an advocate for feedback and has created their own meeting agenda with a weekly check-in or even a question, or an employee resource group that sends out quarterly surveys about diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Of course, things to avoid include, evaluate where you are objectively today. Just because something exists does not mean it's being received well or used. If it is, stop doing it just for the sake of doing it. Combining a new employee feedback management strategy into something that has already been poorly received will do more harm than good. So that is also something to keep in mind. So step two, you are sourcing employee feedback for the good of the company and the happiness of its employees. Your strategy needs to address a few crucial questions. So for example, what are the goals in sourcing feedback and how will you measure them? How will you ensure successful employee adoption and buy-in? Just because it's there, again, doesn't mean that people are actually using it. And who will be responding to reports, and how can we standardize the response and resolution process? And what additional steps can we take to make sure that this is really ingrained in our company culture? So these are some tips. Be sure that your strategy is really comprehensive and transparent. Include a plan and share it out and share the details of what that process looks like. Transparency goes a long way on how reports are collected, how anonymity is maintained if selected, and very importantly, how feedback will be addressed and acted upon. Nobody wants to think that their feedback is going into a black box or nobody is really taking it into consideration. An effective employee feedback management strategy is easier done with a single tool that can help encourage, record, track, anonymize, and analyze all forms of feedback. Although it may seem like extra work in the beginning to move all of your feedback channels into a single platform, it will definitely be worth it in the long term. For example, your company's current feedback collection may currently look like a direct message channel for an instant kind of feedback mechanism, a shared email for more formal feedback, a suggestion box, a whistleblower hotline, annual surveys, and the list can really go on. Why is this ineffective? Feedback from 7 different channels is hard to track and cannot easily be understood and compared to one another in relation. And an annual survey may do the job of collecting information about well-being at a given time, but again, is it seasonal what you're getting as well? Things to avoid is to kind of clearly define and share what employee feedback is and why you are collecting it in the first place, again, building that trust. Often when employer hears employee feedback, they think of annual performance reviews, manager meetings, surveys, and again, a suggestion box. If they are implementing any of these, they may think that there's nothing left to be done or that surveys and performance reviews are enough, or, my door is always open blanket statement is enough. But now more than ever, employees have the upper hand. Keeping your employees happy and retaining a strong and productive workforce means constantly asking for feedback, using various methods, and providing an option for anonymous feedback to really capture everybody's voices in the conversation. Step 3, opening up the pre-planning phase for your feedback strategy. It demonstrates a couple things. Number 1, this is the kind of feedback management program, and ensuring that it's the real deal, encouraging feedback and acting on this feedback from the very inception of the program itself demonstrates a commitment to the cause from the beginning. You want to have a really strong foundation there. Buzz and buy-in is also important. Again, being transparent and open about the impending launch of an initiative can create excitement, and including advocates of the initiative into the planning will create program loyalty and give you strong allies and advocates to help spread the word and excitement as the program launches. Diversify the committee. This is really important. This is important because you want to diversify the voices involved in planning in the pre-planning phase, and this includes everything from gender orientation, preferences, department level, loyalty. The more diverse your pre-planning group is, the more comprehensive your plan will be. And if you have trouble sourcing volunteers, consider providing a stipend or a perk to encourage volunteers. Some things to avoid is don't forget about getting advanced buy-in from a key member of the executive team. That modeling behavior is so important from the top. If your employees don't see buy-in from the executive level, they may resort to thinking that their feedback won't create any real change in evaluation by the decision makers. So nip that thinking in the bud before it begins and get your executive stakeholder involved. Step 4 is promote the existence of your feedback tool and program constantly. Send out company-wide reminders. Incorporate an employee review of the program in your weekly newsletter. Set 10 minutes aside at the monthly all-hands meeting. Incorporate the feedback form linked to your employee handbook or in your email signature. Just remind folks that there's an ongoing way to give that feedback when they need it, meeting employees where they are. Step 4, tips for success. Work with the team and resources that your chosen feedback platform provides. Some platforms like All Voices have teams that will walk you through the process from pre-planning launch to program launch and educational resources. Utilize this team to support you with launching and sustaining your program, and they can provide additional program elements such as company-wide meetings with platforms teams, discussing the security and anonymity of the platform, gaining that trust, and walk through the software with your employees. Don't be afraid of oversaturating your employees. Knowing that you care and are investing in this is important, and dedicating time and resources to encourage feedback, being transparent and acting upon this feedback is really important. Step 5 is to take action and share. Taking relevant and responsive action and sharing any actions done in response to reports and feedback will encourage more feedback, and it will ensure that employees who did provide feedback feel heard, valued, empowered, and ultimately happy. So going back to the beginning of our conversation, this will ultimately create an employee feedback loop. And by continuously staying in touch with employees and their needs, they can stay on maintaining a really strong company culture and employee happiness. Tips for success: be transparent and share often. For example, if the first 10 reports you receive were about the lack of remote or hybrid options, respond to each reporter and share this company-wide. Publicly talking about an issue is not a bad thing. Assuredly, your disgruntled employees are already talking about it, so feedback as you receive an opportunity to encourage even more feedback in a relevant response or company initiative. With a culture of feedback, there can be no more guessing or assumptions. An example of this is we've received a lot of recent feedback about our decision to come back to the office full time because our employees are our greatest asset. We would like to address this source of unhappiness and find a solution that works for everyone. We will be hosting an open forum to source additional thoughts on a remote or hybrid workplace to ensure that a solution we land on has been thought out and relevant to our employees' needs. You really want to address that head on before your top talent is leaving. Things to avoid include confidential, anonymous, and sensitive feedback should remain confidential and anonymous. This means not sharing the feedback that you received word for word or quoting the feedback directly or discussing it with others. So again, here are some kind of key insights from our industry leaders about how they're collecting feedback and what they've learned in doing so as well. And then this is another quote from Arian, SVP of People at FabFitFun, talking about, being honest about where you are in employee feedback and asking where you are in terms of your levels of trust, and then using that as a foundation to develop your employee feedback management strategy moving forward. And then we have Megan from Fivetran talking about their decision to implement really anonymous feedback because not everyone is going to feel comfortable raising their hand at an all hands, bringing something up with their manager, especially if they're new or the manager is new, and just bringing in their own experiences with them as well. So making your pitch, how do you convince senior leadership that this feedback strategy is the way to go? You have your strategy, game plan, a 5-step clear guide on how you're going to create and execute this initiative. The next part of garnering senior leadership buy-in is emphasizing all of the benefits of a comprehensive management plan in your pitch. So let's take a look at just a few of the benefits to expect. So number 1 is increasing the positives, which includes strong employee trust, engagement, and loyalty. That means employees are then innovative, productive, and loyal, which is great for the business. These employees are actively dedicated to doing better, learning more, accomplishing their goals, and beyond. And this leads to increased productivity, revenue, and really smoother business operations for the team. Collecting feedback on what your employees think in their day-to-day is really incredibly valuable because nobody knows company operations, customers, clients, bottlenecks, all of these things than your employees who are on the front lines, boots on the ground. So collecting employee feedback is not only a pro for employees, it is also a pro for the employer as it provides relevant details and insight into where your company can be improving and why. The second benefit, decreasing the negatives. So the cost of replacing an employee is massive, and we talked about that in some of the intro stats. Decreased turnover means less funds spent on training new employees and more revenue from the ideas and work of employees who truly understand their work and have their processes and systems down, allowing them to come up with innovative new solutions and ideas. Also, negative media attention hurts all stakeholders. Customers and partners often don't want to support a company who does not align with their morals and values. Employees don't want to stay at a company that doesn't value its employees and is transparent. Potential future employees don't want to join a company that is experiencing workplace issues and systemic issues and poor workplace culture lead to both above and beyond negative effects, including legal issues and demotivated employees. Nobody wants to deal with that. The third benefit, proactive action and relevant initiatives save funds, time, and resources, and of course, morale in the long run. Initiatives that are created based on assumptions are measured via trial and error, which eats up valuable time and money. Addressing the workplace issues that truly exist, developing relevant initiatives, and taking proactive action against these issues beginning to kind of trend helps employees really avoid this. All right, so tackle obstacles before they arise. You have your game plan, you've emphasized the benefits and what obstacles and questions you can proactively address. So is that your pitch? So how can you be sure that employees will share the feedback is of course really important as well. So this is kind of key bullet points for an effective rollout plan. So successful employee adoption requires a comprehensive and well thought out plan where employees are asked for input, consistently reminded, shown model behavior, and presented with active and relevant initiatives. So to summarize and comprehensive plan we shared earlier, feel free to screenshot this if this is a helpful checklist for you as well. I'll take a second to do that too. The next question is, how can you gather the interest and buy-in from all senior leaders? Again, cannot stress enough the importance of executive leadership buy-in, people manager buy-in, and really modeling that behavior that employee feedback matters, it's valued, and will be acted upon. So initiatives are approved if they can demonstrate value, effectiveness, and a clear strategy for success. Emphasize to your leaders how this strategy will benefit your organization as a whole, from morale, and then of course to numbers, to revenue. And we covered this before, but here's three main benefits for employee feedback, benefits that are clearly valuable and inarguable. The next question is, of course, do you have bandwidth to support a comprehensive employee feedback management strategy and plan? What if I get inundated with all of these reports? That's the elephant in the room, right? Is the bandwidth. Here are some tangible responses to this question for bandwidth. An employee feedback management strategy is really helpful in just mitigating risks ahead of time. Fear of bandwidth can cause anyone to step back from taking action on actively sourcing employee feedback and asking the question, what if I get, an influx of reports? It can seem hard to prioritize employee feedback over the short-term solution and generate kind of quicker results. But simply put, not collecting this feedback doesn't mean that these feelings and issues don't exist. Feedback without an outlet creates systemic workplace issues and poor workplace culture that only leads to more work down the line in the form of retention issues, leading to more recruiting needs, potential legal issues, negative press, and the list goes on, that are really difficult to come back from. It's better to be proactive than play catch up after a public or reputation harm issues come to light in the public. Although the results from a comprehensive feedback strategy might not be immediately visible or gratifying, they are really significant. With a strategy like this one, you can build trust, decrease negative elements that create more work, stay competitive as an employer, save time and energy on various softwares and initiatives that simply do not work. So if you have questions about bandwidth, this is a good slide to refer back to. All right, so that was the end of our presentation. I know that some folks might have any questions. If you do have questions, feel free to write them in the chat and we'll stay on for a couple more minutes. But thank you so much for attending our webinar about employee feedback management and really employee happiness.
Looks like we have one question that came in. And to quickly introduce myself, hi everyone, I'm Michaela on our partnerships team here at All Voices. One of the questions was who's responsible for addressing feedback? So we're really seeing three teams kind of in the All Voices tool. One of those teams being someone from the DE&I side of things, someone from our HR people teams, and then someone from our legal team. So based on the type of feedback that's coming through, we can have those automatically routed to those specific teams who can be addressing those. Can you answer how a platform that emphasizes just sharing feedback could also help support for more urgent reports? So the way that I'm kind of thinking about this is All Voices is really kind of capturing on a range of different topics. So we are capturing on those more urgent or egregious issues that may be happening, but we're also kind of expanding it out to capture those gray area topics as well. So what we're really emphasizing when we're rolling out a tool like All Voices with the companies that we're working with is your company really, really cares that everyone within the organization has a way to report, ask questions, voice concerns in a way that feels really, really comfortable and safe for them. And so because of that, your company is rolling out this anonymous reporting tool, All Voices, for you to be able to speak up on anything that you may feel uncomfortable for whatever reason having a conversation with the company today. So I think we're really emphasizing that all feedback is important, and anything from questions, comments, concerns, positive feedback, like your company wants to hear from you. So we're really emphasizing just the overall idea that like your company wants to hear from you, and we want to create that channel and that space for you to be able to have that conversation. Some goals to think about when sourcing feedback and measuring them. So each company is thinking about goals a little bit differently. I found a lot of our companies are thinking about, one, we want to start capturing feedback. We haven't been getting feedback before. So I think that's one goal that we're seeing. We're also seeing companies say they have a goal around building trust with employees. A lot of times I'll hear this if a company has recently gone through like an acquisition or the team is growing really rapidly. And so there's kind of this goal of, I want to build trust with these new employees that are coming in. And I think creating, again, as many lines of communication that are open to those employees is going to be really beneficial. All Voice is obviously a piece of that, but also making sure that they are aware that they can come to any member of like the HR or the leadership team is another great way to do that. So I think goals look different depending on the type of company. Some companies are more focused on, hey, we really want to we want help with our Glassdoor reviews. We want a more kind of productive internal line of communication. And so that's their goal in using All Voices. So I think it depends on the type of company, but what we work with you on is figuring out what those goals actually look like, and then we can put some action items into place on our end to make sure that we're achieving those goals for you all. Another question, why not use a Google form? The reason why we really wanted to create All Voices was so that we could actually have a two-way conversation. What we found is, especially when we were first building out All Voices, we heard a lot of teams kind of saying like, anonymous reporting is really great in theory, but sometimes it can feel like a pile of complaints for me. And so one feature that we really wanted to include was a way for you to go back to that employee and really continue the conversation with them. And so we've done that by creating an encrypted communication channel that allows you to go back to that employee and continue the conversation. So I think that's one of like the key differentiators between All Voices and Google Forms. What are some examples of successful rollouts for feedback strategy that you've seen? What do these companies do differently from the rest? So I would say when it comes to successful rollouts, we're really working with the companies one-on-one in kind of two areas that we're thinking about. So we're thinking about awareness of the tool, and then we're also thinking about how can we ensure that employees truly trust the tool as well. So I think from successful rollout, it's all about collaboration. So in that rollout process, there's a handful of calls that we're kind of walking companies through. And I think each of these different topics are really, really great things to think about when you're rolling out a tool. So one of those is, how are we actually launching the tool out to employees? what does it look like to really create that awareness? How do we get employees to be aware that this tool exists and that they trust it? The other piece of that is having a response and resolution strategy in place. So now that you have that data and that feedback coming in, how do we ensure as a team of admins that we're responding to these in a timely fashion, that we're resolving these within a timely fashion? And so I think having all of those pieces kind of thought out before you're rolling out the tool can ensure for a really successful launch. I think we've gotten to all of them in the chat. If anyone has any further questions.
Question about feedback and how it helps company culture. For feedback, everybody has an opinion to share. And the more that you get ahead of it, the more trust you're building as well, which we talked about too. And employees want to make sure that they are seen and heard, whether that's your manager or benefits, and just that understanding. So feedback really kind of promotes a really healthy and thriving company culture. And when you know that somebody is unhappy, so an employee who's been there for 90 days or 5 years, you really get ahead of that and have a really open conversation about it and understand how you can make the experience better for everyone else before that individual leaves, starts talking to their friends about the company as well. So the short answer to the question is people are giving feedback to each other or somewhere, and you really want to make sure that you have a finger on the pulse on what's happening to make sure that your company culture is thriving for everyone. All right, I know we have a couple minutes left, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Michaela or myself on the All Voices end. We hope this was really helpful for the team, and have a good rest of your day, everyone.